Colton McKivitz, within the last hour, has become significantly richer. The Niners signed him. Is it a 1-year deal for $7 million? Is it a 2-year deal? I'm seeing it kind of reported in different spots at different amounts. What's your assessment of the deal today? Is it a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal?
So it's a 1-year contract extension worth $7 million. So now he's under contract through 2025, and 65% of that $7 million is guaranteed money.
Okay. So he's on the books this year for $3.6 million. And I know there's a lot of people that are just immediately in their feelings about this. I love this move. One, you need continuity on your offensive line. The Niners have 6 defensive line free agents. They could let all 6 go, replace them with 6 better players, and they'll be fine. But with offensive line, you got to have some continuity. This guy's smart. He's tough. He can play all 5 spots. I personally think his best spot is center, and we can get into that in a second. This year, he ranked 47th out of 81 offensive tackles, 8 spots lower than Mike McGlinchey, but for a fraction of the price. And in 2023, he played over 1,000 snaps. McKivitz did. He allowed 47 pressures, 9 sacks, 4 hits, 34 hurries. Just from listening to your video, we probably don't agree on this one. You don't seem to like McKivitz back with the Niners. Give me your assessment. Am I reading into that?
Well, you're correct. And I have an issue with this signing if this is the Niners' plan at right tackle. The last 2 years in the playoffs, I think San Francisco has been exposed along the offensive line. Against Philadelphia in the NFC Championship game and in Super Bowl 58 against Kansas City, when the Chiefs were able to generate 11 pressures on Brock Purdy, 9 of them were unblocked. And Colton McKivitz has been a part of that problem, not last year, but this past year, on an offensive line that I simply did not think was good enough against elite teams and elite edge rushers. And the numbers really don't check out. His Pro Football Focus numbers aren't good. In 2023, more than 1,000 snaps, 9 sacks allowed, 47 total pressures, 4 hits. It's not always on Colton McKivitz. And let's get this out of the way too. Chris Jones going unblocked in the Super Bowl was not on Colton McKivitz. Spencer Burford even admitted that was his mistake. In the playoffs, McKivitz also was not good against upper echelon competition. 12 total pressures and 2 hits. I think offensive line in 2021, 2022, and in 2023 has been the biggest thing that's held this team back. And the Niners continue to be somewhat cheap in investing along the offensive line. And for me, you look at this roster with Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Charvarius Ward, with head coach Kyle Shanahan. To me, when you go cheap along the offensive line, when it continues to be an issue, it's like having a Rolls Royce with hubcaps on it. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, if they still address offensive line at right guard and right tackle, and they're bringing back McKivitz as maybe a 6th offensive lineman who can play right tackle, who can play guard, because to your point, he does offer you versatility and he's more of a backup, then I can see why the Niners made this move, because you're right. They need some offensive line continuity. But if their plan is to have Colton McKivitz as the right tackle for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, I don't think that Colton McKivitz is a starting right tackle for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. And I think that's become clear over time. Now, the positive spin lowers his cap hit for 2024 and 2025. That frees up some dollars to address other areas of need. Did they see Kevin Dotson get $16 million per from the Los Angeles Rams and say, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money for a guy who the numbers check out for him to be somewhat of an average player? Maybe. I just hope this isn't what their plan is at right tackle. I hope it doesn't take them away from drafting a right guard or a right tackle in the NFL draft in a class that is loaded with a bunch of offensive linemen who I saw last week and talked to them are really good players, built-in labs, and can be significant contributors on the offensive line for the next 5 to 10 years.
All fair. All fair. My whole read on it is that they're probably going to get rid of Brendel. So, Brendel signed a 4-year deal for $16.4 million. He ranked like 16th out of 36 centers. He played 1,024 snaps, 29 pressures, 2 sacks, 3 hits, 24 hurries, only 1 penalty. But to me, I think McKivitz's best spot is, a sixth O lineman, swing guy, or maybe starter at center. I like him more at center. But then I also like this signing for, I don't want to get to pick 28 in the draft in the first round, a couple picks in front of the 49ers, and have the 49ers going, oh my God, Alt, Fashanu, Fuaga, Latham, Mims, Morgan, Guyton, and Sumatea are all gone. So now we're just going to have to take Patrick Paul from the University of Houston, or we're going to have to take Karan Amagaji, who's a tremendous athlete, but he's a raw prospect coming out of Yale. I kind of like, obviously it's a great tackle group, and all those guys that I named already are pretty damn good. I kind of like that next tier that has Blake Fisher from Notre Dame, that has Javon Foster from Missouri, that has Christian Jones from the University of Texas, that has Ladarius Henderson from Michigan. I really loved what I saw out of Gottlieb Ayadazi from Maryland at the Combine. One of my favorite offensive tackles in this entire draft is Garrett Greenfield from South Dakota State. He's projected to be there in round 2 and round 3. So I don't know. I mean, to me, it's like there's a chance if you go for that second tier, if the Niners evaluation is the same as mine, that they really have other needs and they like Greenfield and Ayadezi and Henderson and maybe Roger Rosengarten or Christian Jones, Javon Foster. If they like that second group of tackles, well, they may go defensive line early. And to me, I'd rather see them do that. I think that's where the value plays at their spot in the draft. And if Colton McKivitz gives you a little bit of latitude to go D-line or different position up front, corner, and try to hunt for value on offensive line with some guys who are a little bit more raw, they're not quite plug and play guys, I'm okay with that. I'd be fine if they drafted Garrett Greenfield and had McKivitz there to kind of, just in case Greenfield's not ready in the first month.
One thing this does do, it does give you flexibility for a couple of reasons. And again, if McKivitz is coming back as your swing tackle, a guy who can play guard, can play center, I like that because on a 53-man roster, you're always going to have 7, 8 offensive linemen, and 6 or 7 of them, maybe 8 of them, are going to be active on game day. So it gives you flexibility there, and having a guy who can fill in at all those spots, who played a lot last year, and you went to the Super Bowl with McKivitz playing at right tackle, I think is valuable. And then another reason why it gives you some flexibility, you now can probably more so go best player available at number 31 as compared to reaching and drafting at a position of just need and not getting the best player. And I'm always kind of a BPA, best player available type of guy. And look, $16 million per year for a guard, that's a little bit too expensive for my liking. And that might take San Francisco away from a Robert Hunt or a Micah Wenu, 2 free agent targets who I really like because they're better than Kevin Dotson. And now they're going to have markets where they go to the negotiating table and say, we're better than Kevin Dotson. We deserve a little bit more than that. So paying $16 million per for a guard or a right tackle for that matter is a lot of money, especially when you have other needs on this roster. And you're paying a lot of dollars to other players on your team because your roster is littered with premium players that the San Francisco 49ers have been able to draft and develop or sign in free agency. And cornerback, it's a good cornerback class, especially at number 31. They could go defensive line now at number 31 if they want. Shoot, they could go wide receiver. Xavier Worthy would not shock me at all. And that would be an interesting selection if you have Xavier Worthy, Brandon Ayuk, and Deebo Samuel for 2024. And then next year, after you extend Ayuk, hopefully you have some flexibility if you want to move off of Deebo Samuel, because you don't think that you can pay 2 wide receivers $25 million each, totaling that to $50 million. Again, I just have an issue here if it's McKivitz as the starting right tackle, because I just thought he got pushed around, and I just don't think he's good enough to sustainably be a starting right tackle trying to protect Brock Purdy. You didn't run to the right side all that much because he wasn't that good against the run. If a player like Graham Barton out of Duke falls to number 31, that'd be best player available for me, because I think he's worthy of drafting in the teens.
Well, it's interesting because they're outside of Trent Brown, who's got weight problems and has floated around. I don't see that tackle in free agency. So I love the re-signing of McKivitz, because at least now you're not all in at tackle at 31. I'm just looking at one mock draft, and who knows how the whole thing shakes out. But I mean, they've got Troy Fatanu, who I really love, and I thought his workout in Indy was impressive. The Washington offensive lineman. Now, is he a guard? Is he a tackle? Some people think he's a guard. I like Graham Barton too. Is he a guard or is he a tackle?
He played center too at Duke.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who is all over the map. To me, I just think when I'm looking at that pick at 31, based coming out of the combine, I would say I want to look hard at Xavier Legette right there. I want to look hard at Braden Fisk right there. I may want to look hard at Rook Aurora, I should say, at that spot. I know that's early for some people, but I think Aurora is really, really special. So those are 3 guys that I would like to look at over Kingsley Sumatea and whatever offensive lineman is left there. Edgerrin Cooper, I think, is a star linebacker for A&M. I mean, he's as safe as it comes. Cedric Gray could be an amazing linebacker for the 49ers as well. So I don't know. I mean, I kind of like
McKinstry, Nate Wiggins. Maybe they fall to 31. Those are really good corners.
TJ Tampa is super physical. I love everything that I've read and seen and watched about Zach Frazier from West Virginia, another kid from West Virginia who could be maybe the best center in the draft, in my opinion. I mean, I think he's really good. Cooper Beebe from K-State is a destroyer as a guard. He might be somebody I'd be interested in.
Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon's a stud too, the center.
Yeah, the center. So I think McKivitz is a smart signing here. Why? Because I think he's versatile. He can play all 5 spots. He's smart. He's tough. He could play right tackle in a pinch. But, if you don't have him and he goes somewhere else, now you have to go right tackle at 31. And to me, I think their best spot going into the draft is to be able to go right tackle or offensive line at 31, but not be wed to it.
And it's nice too that they have 11 picks at their disposal, and they're obviously drafting for the first time in the first round since they drafted Trey Lance. And I kind of like the picks that they have lined up in the second round, the compensatory picks in the third. They have a bunch of picks in the fifth. And you can find really quality offensive linemen, again, in a really deep offensive line class in some of those later rounds and go best player available here. Again, my issue is that $7 million, 65% of that is guaranteed. That's legitimate money. I saw somebody throw out there, this is a thank you to Colton McKivitz for holding it down at right tackle, but that's like solid offensive line money. And so my initial reaction was, oh my gosh, is this really the plan at right tackle after the last 3 years we've been talking about how offensive line has been an issue for this team?
Yeah, I think more than anything, you don't want to be naked at offensive tackle, but you need an offensive tackle. You need your future left tackle. You need your future right tackle. McKivitz is what he is, he's a really smart, tough, assignment sound, sixth offensive lineman on a championship team, or maybe he's your starting center. But I don't think he's a starting right tackle on a championship team. I don't. But I do think it's smart to get this done because he's so versatile. And I think he can help you in a lot of spots, and he could lead to you, deciding, you know what, if you can re-sign Feliciano, maybe Brendel could be excess. I do think they're still very much alive in the race to get an offensive tackle in the draft. I just don't think it's gonna. The way I mocked it, and I've looked at it a bunch, I think if you're really going to kick butt on the draft and look for value, you got to find a couple of players before your offensive tackle. Get to that second tier. Like Javon Foster, the hand strength that he showed in the one-on-ones in Mobile was fantastic. And this guy, I think, is really athletic. I think he's got the frame to put on another 10 pounds. This guy could be the replacement for Trent Jones in 2 years and a starter at right tackle this year. So
yeah, I like Foster a lot. And I know you're in the locker room all the time, and I was around the team for the Super Bowl and stuff. I know you've interviewed McKivitz a lot. So you kind of get the sense like this guy's tough. He can fill in at all spots. And honestly, offensive lineman interviews are some of my favorites because they're the most cerebral. They're the most well-spoken. They see the game from a different perspective. I actually love speaking with offensive linemen because they're so enjoyable to talk to because they really allow you to see the game in a different way. And you learn a lot from offensive linemen too.
Well, two things about it. One, from being around Trent Williams, Trent, has sung the praises of McKivitz multiple times. And he basically just says, hey, look, this guy's not afraid. It doesn't matter if he's going up against Aaron Donald or Chris Jones. He's a tough, good old boy he's not afraid. So that's one. I think versatility is important. Then when you do go in the room, the one thing that you get a feeling for, and when you get a chance to talk to Forster as much as we do, you get a feeling for how they're kind of their internal pecking order. And even though McKivitz gets dragged by certain content creators and fans, in the room, he's very well respected. And to me, that tells me something about the guy. He's a very well respected player in the room. He's, you walk up to his locker, he's almost always got the game plan on the tablet next to Charlie Warner, and they're sitting there going through play after play after play. So, they made him their gold helmet designation player in the draft year when he came out. And that's they don't have a lot of guys like that. They don't always work out. I mean, Trey Lance was one of those guys. I believe maybe Braden Willis might have been one of those guys. But basically, it's guys that they feel like not only are good players, but fit their culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I agree with you. If he is the sole answer at right tackle, and you're just going to put him out there like you did this year and just say, we're crossing our fingers that he's good enough at right tackle, bad move. But if he's there to give yourself a little bit more, so John Lynch can play the draft a little bit more straight for value, then I think that's a good thing, because I don't want to see them reach for an offensive lineman at 31 just to say they drafted one, especially not if they're going to pass on, Ruka Rororo. I mean, that guy's 295 pounds and fast. Not if you're going to pass on, TJ Tampa, who's a awesome number one type corner who's physical and hits and sets the edge. And, to me, there's going to be some higher rated players than the 9th rated or 10th rated offensive tackle, which is what they're going to be staring at most likely at 31.
And I'm certainly willing to eat the crow if this move ends up working out, if McKivitz improves. And I'm all for cultural fit, scheme fit, having a guy like this who can be a critical member of filling in for everybody along that offensive line. All of that is great. My initial reaction was $7 million contract extension, 65% of that is guaranteed. That's legit money. If the Niners' plan is for him to be your right tackle, when you continue to kind of be cheap along the offensive line, you paid Trent Williams, that's great. You drafted Aaron Banks in the 2nd round. It's worked out pretty well. I didn't love the move. Jake Brendel, $5 million per year at the center spot. I think you can find a better player than that. Maybe they address that this offseason. But if by the end of the offseason, Brendel's your center, they run it back with Burford once again, and then McKivitz at right tackle, or even John Feliciano at right guard, who's a little bit better than Burford, what are you expecting the end result to be? You're playing with fire at that point when we've seen this Niners offensive line get pushed around by some physical teams up front. It just can't be the solution when you see some of the other elite teams in the NFL investing heavily and having these dogs along the offensive line, like a Creed Humphrey at center for Kansas City, Elaine Johnson at right tackle for Philadelphia. When Philadelphia's paying big money to Elaine Johnson and Jordan Mailata, they can invest there. And in the draft, like Trent Williams, 35 years old. So at some point, you have to have a plan to draft an offensive tackle who might be able to start at right tackle and then move over to left tackle. And if a good player falls to 31, Kingsley Suamataia, any of these other tackles, and their best player available, I think you have to address that. And then if you pop McKivitz to right guard, I think that he could play better as a right guard, and that's pretty solid guard money.
I'd love to see the Niners go sign Nick Allegretti, who I'm a big fan of from Kansas City, and plug him in at right guard. If it was up to me, I'd have Trent Williams at left tackle, Banks at left guard, McKivitz at center, Allegretti at right guard, Feliciano as a backup, Burford as a backup, Zakel as a backup, and then I would draft an offensive tackle or two, and see if I could get one of them to start and one of them to back up. But that's how I would address the offensive line.